Hey, Emma.
Hey Nick, how you doing?
I'm good. I'm excited to have you on to talk about self doubt. I got a great reader question that's all about self doubt. So I'm going to lay it on you and then we'll see what kind of suggestions and ideas you have for this person. All right.
Sounds fun.
So a reader asks, I'm very indecisive and constantly doubt myself in both big and small things. It's exhausting and I'm sick of it. I've done therapy for it twice and neither was very helpful. I try to meditate, but it doesn't seem to be making a difference. Any advice?
That's like such a good question. I think a lot of people struggle with self-doubt. And I think one of the loops people get stuck in, is trying to kind of wrestle with their thoughts, like trying to stop having thoughts that are doubtful. So someone might, in a practice of meditation, think that the goal of meditation is to make your brain be quiet and to stop having these thoughts. But I'd like to encourage people to think about this in a different way. So let's back up a little bit. Say your brain's a word machine. It's going to produce 100 thoughts. And if we imagined these thoughts all out on a piece of paper, and some of these thoughts are like, hey, you're doing a good job. Hey, you know what you're doing. Yeah, that was a good decision, Bob. And then the other thoughts are like, oh, what if you're making the wrong decision? What if you're not good enough? Oh, look at Sally. She seems to have everything figured out, right? Or a thought like, I probably shouldn't even try. I'll just mess up. These are like all of these thoughts. If you imagine these all out on a board, your brain is going to naturally gravitate toward noticing the thoughts that are scarier, like the thoughts that have a little bit of an emotional pull to them. So the thoughts that are doubtful come with a little perception of threat, like, oh, I could get fired or I could mess something up. And those thoughts are going to feel really loud. When those thoughts feel loud, we have a tendency to wrestle with them a little bit. So like, oh, you're not good enough. And then you think, well, is that true? Am I good enough or am I not good enough? Well, I'm a little bit better than Sally, but I'm a little bit worse than so-and-so. And we get into this habit of kind of obsessing over, is it true? Is it true? Should I believe it? I have to make this thought go away. And I would say that that is usually why people get stuck in self-doubt. They're trying to like change their thinking or make these thoughts go away. And I would say instead, ask a different question. Ask, is this thought helpful? And Janina Fisher, who's like a pretty famous trauma therapist, she asked this question in regards to thoughts about oneself. So like if you have a thought like, oh, I'm not a good person, you ask, is this thought resourcing? This is a different way of asking the question, is it helpful? Is it resourcing? Does thinking this thought provide you with more skills and support or options? Or does it provide you with less skills, supports, or options? So you ask, is this thought helping me? So if you think, oh, I probably shouldn't even try, I'll just mess up. Does that thought provide you with resources? Does it give you support? Does it give you creative options to try and problem solve? Or does it make you shut down? And you can feel the difference. Like she's a nervous system person. So she's like, you can feel the difference in your nervous system when you ask about this thought. Does the thought help me feel safe and energized, or does this thought make me feel closed down? So that's my first thought, is saying, let's ask if this thought is helpful instead of whether it's true. And if you say like, oh, what if I mess up? You could kind of take that thought and say, what would be a helpful version of this thought? What if I'm making the wrong decision? Okay. Is it going to be helpful for me to endlessly go back into decision making? No. It might be more helpful for me to say like, oh, I'm going to see if there's a different resource where I could learn a little bit more about this decision, and then I'll set a timer. And the most helpful thing is going to be to like learn a little bit more, ask one person, and then make my decision. Something like that might be more resourcing or more helpful than saying like, am I bad? Am I making the wrong decision or the right decision? You know, like over and over again. That's my first thought.
Yeah. Really good, really helpful, a really helpful reframe, I think.
Yeah.
And something I saw a lot as a therapist, something I realized really quickly in my work as a therapist was, it was shocking to me how often people in most of their lives with other people at their work, whatever, were not especially judgmental or kind of moralistic about things. But then as soon as they started talking to me about their own inner experience, their own thoughts, their own emotions, their own beliefs, they got crazy judgmental. So this can come from a lot of different places, but if you notice that in yourself, one thing you can do is like, you can think to yourself, well, I would never operate externally like that. So there's this weird double standard where I'm incredibly moralistic and judgmental with myself. I'm kind of obsessed with whether something is true or good or bad or not true. So I love this reframe because it shifts people. It can help shift out of from a moral or like moralistic mindset, which is, it's fine to be able to think about things morally. It's actually important, right? But it's not always helpful with ourselves and with our inner experiences. So to shift from kind of a moral to a mechanical mindset, like, oh, this is a thing and it's trying to do something. Like, do I need to, is it helping me or is it not so helpful right now? So that's my little gloss on your tip, which I think is excellent, of shifting from true or false to helpful or not. Great one.
Yeah, I like that. And I think even as you describe that, it touches on an aspect of meditation or mindfulness, which is watching out for judgment and being just mindful of judgment. So this person mentioned they've tried to meditate, and it's like, well, you could imply these principles of mindfulness of like watching for judgments by trying to say instead, look, oh, what can I act on? I'm not going to judge myself, just like I won't judge other people.
Yeah.
So, good point.
Yeah. All right, number 2, what do you got for us?
Okay, here's the second one. I think people who have a lot of self-doubt, they think that other people who seem confident don't have feelings like doubt. And research shows that actually confident people aren't actually less likely to doubt themselves. They're just more likely to move forward while feeling uncertain. So confidence is not the same as feeling no fear. Confidence is really choosing to take action when there is uncertainty involved. And I think the pursuit of certainty really keeps people stuck. They want to know for sure before they take action. And that's what leads to kind of fueling that cycle of self-doubt. And you'll hear some famous people who I can't remember their names right now have said things like, courage is not the absence of fear. And when we try to put our energy into controlling our feelings first, we end up really tending to avoid things that would be helpful. So it's like, oh, I'm not going to make that decision till I'm sure that it's the right decision. And then it's like, well, now my uncertainty just made my decision for me. So I think instead of trying to not feel fear, let me give one more example of this. Someone might be like, oh, I'm not sure if I could ask someone out on a date because I feel uncertain. So if you're using like emotional reasoning, which is I got to make this feeling go away first and then I'll take the action, the only way to ask someone out on a date is like to get drunk, right? You're trying to avoid that feeling first in order to feel confident. Reality is that's not true confidence. True confidence is saying, well, I trust myself enough that if I get rejected, I can handle this. And you accept that uncertainty, you embrace that uncertainty. So this is like, I think like acting is going to look like doing things that scare you, using good enough thinking, like, oh, 70% is good enough. And that's going to increase your tolerance of uncertainty and imperfection. And you can practice this in like really small areas before you make like really big decisions. But eventually you could increase your ability to tolerate uncertainty by simply taking action.
Yeah. I think this is great. Such a helpful distinction. And just a reminder, even if you know this intellectually, it's a good thing to get in the habit of reminding yourself of that, like, confidence or courage doesn't mean the absence of fear, right? It means a word you and I end up always talking about, Emma, willingness, like being willing to take action despite how you happen to feel, right? I think it's just, really, really super helpful. And it sort of represents this really fundamental mindset shift where instead of making decisions based on how you feel or how you want to feel, it's that we're trying to cultivate this alternative sort of habit or instinct, which is making decisions based on what's important to us or our values or our ideals or whatever it is. So I think this tip is like part of it's like the tip of the iceberg of a much bigger shift in thinking that in my experience, once you really start making that shift, which takes time, that's where self-doubt becomes less of an issue. It still shows up, but you're less controlled by it when there's this bigger mindset shift away from making decisions based on how we want to feel towards what we really value and what matters to us.
Good point. Yep. And I love it. Anytime someone brings up values, I'm like, bingo. Yes, that's the answer.
Totally. Yeah. It's a little funny that we, in emotional health and mental health, a lot of us, professionals and providers, we get a little too obsessed with emotions. Emotions are super important and you don't want to ignore them or be dismissive of them for sure. But you can also swing too far in the other direction and get kind of obsessed with them and get lost in them. Right. And that is, I think, equally unhelpful as being dismissive of them. So it's about kind of creating this healthy balance or relationship in the middle with where we respect our emotions, but we don't necessarily take orders from them.
Absolutely. And that's like exactly what I was going to talk about for my third point, which is a phrase or a term we use in acceptance and commitment therapy called diffusion, where we develop the ability to detach a little bit from our thoughts and feelings in order to free us to live our values. So if you've got self-doubt around, like, let's say it's something really important to you, like your parenting. Oh, am I parenting correctly or am I not parenting correctly? Is this going to ruin my kid? Are they going to hate me? Are they going to be in therapy and talk to their therapist about me? Right? And you're like constantly worrying and worrying. And one of the ways that our brilliant human brains like to try to avoid having feelings is overthinking stuff. So like constantly thinking and ruminating. This is like my favorite form of avoidance.
Oh, wait, wait, break this down for a second, Emma, because I think this is really important, but maybe not intuitive.
Yeah.
How is overthinking a way of avoiding how we're feeling? Can you walk me through that a little bit?
So our emotions usually show up as sensations in our physical body. And if you slow down and you sit with those sensations, you're going to notice they're uncomfortable. And we have some emotions are uncomfortable, and we have a natural drive to escape, avoid, or try to control things that feel in our bodies uncomfortable.
Sure.
And so we develop all these systems to do it, including like, oh, I'm going to eat a donut because I'm anxious. Or, like, my favorite is intellectualizing. Like, let's go up into my head. Let's distract myself with all of my thinking so that I can avoid my present moment experience, which is somewhat uncomfortable.
Yeah, so everything down here is uncomfortable, so I'm going to go shoot up right up into here to get away from it. Okay.
Yep, form of distraction and avoidance.
Yep.
And a mindfulness practice can... Again, this person mentions meditation. I'm going to go back to principles of mindfulness is like, can we allow ourselves to create space for the physical sensations in our body that we were previously trying to outthink and outrun by doubting ourselves over and over again? So a mindful practice would say like, okay, let's sit with this for a minute long enough to take an intentional action instead of a reactive response, which is like, oh, what am I thinking? What am I feeling? What do my feelings tell me? And when we take an intentional choice, we use our values to say, well, what do I care about as a parent? I care about trying to play with my kids, for example. And is all of this ruminating about my parenting helping me play with my kids? Probably not. I'm going to allow myself to feel a little bit of uncertainty, not be sure if I'm doing it right. And I'm going to lean in. I'm going to notice this discomfort or boredom when it comes up when I play with my kids. I'm gonna allow it to be there. I'm gonna take that.
I've never been bored playing with my kids. Emma, you get bored playing with your kids?
Oh my gosh, boredom is my number one most feared emotion. I'm like, give me anything, give me sadness or anxiety over boredom, you know. Yeah. And so when it comes to self-doubt, my third point is focus your energy on your actions. So you go from the solid place of accepting your feelings, and you channel your focus and your energy into your actions, not on your feelings. And to do that, you have to clarify your values. So this is where mindfulness becomes a tool, not just a practice. It's not something you do for 10 minutes. It's something throughout the day you touch in, you maintain touch with, what you care about, and then you get intentional about acting on it. And on a practical level, this can look like accepting uncertainty by saying, look, I'm only gonna spend one day deciding on which car to buy. And I'm going to limit my decision time, and I'm going to allow uncertainty to be there while I buy a car. Or you're going to say, I'm going to flip a coin about which book to buy at the bookstore. I always get like overwhelmed at the bookstore. Which book should I buy? I want to buy them all.
All of them.
Yeah. And so there's some other like kind of practical ways to just redirect back to what action do I care about? How am I going to act, instead of what do I feel? What do I think? What do I feel? What do I think? And the other one is just kind of managing rumination. So rumination is like, what if I messed up in the past? Why didn't I do better in that relationship or whatever? So you would maybe use a mantra like, what's done is done. I'm going to focus on the now. Past me made that decision. I'm here. I'm going to make the best decision I can. And so it's just like little sayings like that, like things that cut self-doubt short and channel into action can be a helpful practice.
It's always fun talking to you, Emma, because I think, you come from a very kind of acty perspective, acceptance therapy, and I have a much more kind of behaviorist background, but it's fun to see where they converge. And like, I think your idea of kind of being mindful and accepting a feeling and then acting on your values, like one way behaviorally that I think about that is, this is actually how you go about doing the thing you talked about the previous step, which is building confidence, where when you are willing to just sit with an uncomfortable sensation or feeling like boredom or uncertainty or fear or whatever it is, what you're teaching your brain, what your brain is literally learning, right, is that it is okay. Nothing catastrophic happens if I feel bad.
Right.
So that the next time you feel bad, your brain's going to be a little bit more okay with, it's going to be a little bit easier to sit with it instead of immediately impulsively avoiding it by intellectualizing or avoiding it by making a new decision or not sitting with the situation, whatever it is. So I think that can also, certain people I find like that, that learning perspective, that it is kind of like a nuts and boltsy quality to it where acceptance can sound a little fluffy. I don't think it is, but what's happening under the hood, I think, is that your brain is learning that uncertainty, anxiety, boredom, all those uncomfortable things are not bad. Just because they're uncomfortable doesn't mean they're dangerous. And the more your brain learns that, the more confident you end up feeling, the more likely you're able to move through the self-doubt and make a choice.
I love that. I love that. And I think as listening to you, it clarifies for me this idea of when someone's wrestling with self-doubt, they're spending a lot of time up here trying to change their brain to be more confident. And our brain usually learns from experience. So you're talking about basically exposure therapy. When you expose yourself to uncertainty, you make a decision even if you're not sure. Then it works out okay. Then your brain is like, oh, I can survive being uncertain and making a decision. I can survive that. And your brain's going to dial down that, because it learned through the behavior. It's going to dial down that self-doubt over time, most likely. Like 95% of the time, that anxiety dials down. And the other 5% of the time, you're still making a choice based on your values and living the way you want to live your life. I love that.
Totally.
Yeah.
So I'm going to throw in one little tip that I've really recently found to be especially helpful as I've leaned into it with myself a little bit in certain areas, but with my clients, which is to look for opportunities to practice tolerating minor bouts of self-doubt. So people who really struggle with self-doubt, one thing I've noticed is when they talk to me about their instances of self-doubt that are hard, they tend to be on the big or even kind of like medium grade intensity, But what they often do is there are tons of little moments of self-doubt that they don't even think about because they don't bother them too much. They're just like, okay, I had a little bit of self-doubt and I'm moved on, right? The thing though is you can use those minor bouts of self-doubt as practice opportunities to get better at dealing with moderate or even major bouts of self-doubt. So I think it sounds strange, but you actually want to turn into and look for those really minor, small versions of self-doubt so that you can practice this skill and get better at it and more easily apply it in the bigger, more intense moments of self-doubt. So it's very counterintuitive, but looking for and using small versions of self-doubt as practice opportunities would be my little point I'm going to sneak in here to piggyback off yours.
So let me see if I understand what you're saying. So if I was like, had this big self-doubt of like, oh, what if I'm a terrible friend? Like, what if no one wants me as a friend or something like that? And then I would like be like, oh, I'm going to play pickleball and like, what if they, I don't know, give me an example. Like, what if they, these new friends I'm trying to make, what if I say something silly, so I probably shouldn't talk, so they don't think I'm dumb or something like that. And then I just like practice like, oh, I'll just like say something silly and see how it goes. Like that. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, you want to look for, keep it in the same domain. So like you're talking about like friends and like how people think of you, right? Let's say that's where your self-doubt is kind of focused. So I would look for other social situations, start being more mindful in other social situations, maybe where you meet new people, like maybe some new person joins your team at work and you don't really have to deal with them that much. You're in a meeting per week with them or something like that. But maybe in a meeting you have a silly, like quote unquote, silly thought pops through your mind, like, oh, like, well, what if they don't like me? And your normal instinct would just be like, whatever, like, doesn't matter, because you don't have to deal with this person on a regular basis. But that is a minor bout of self-doubt that instead of just letting it roll off you, which is fine, you can actually use that and say, how am I feeling right now? When I have a little bit of self-doubt, do I feel anxious? Do I feel sad? Do I feel tense? Right? Do I feel like, what do I feel? And okay, like I'm just going to sit with that for a second and then I'll move on before moving on. So you're practicing this move. It's like a dance move, right? And you're getting repetitions in so that it's more natural when you're in like a live scenario with a really hard one.
So you'd be a little more intentional and say, okay, I noticed I felt some self-doubt. I leaned into it, didn't kill me. Everything turned out okay, no big deal. And you're like, okay, I can do that with the small stuff.
And then you move on.
Yeah, and then
It's a 10-second practice
Okay.
opportunity, right?
I love it.
The other thing this does, I think that's really helpful is big picture. Again, you always have to ask, like, what is my brain learning? Based on my behavior, internal and external, what is my brain learning? And if your brain sees you deliberately approaching moments of self-doubt and sitting with them, instead of doing your usual thing, which is, like you said, either wrestling with it or avoiding it, both of which tell your brain self-doubt is bad and scary, which makes it harder to handle the next time. If you are looking for and then welcoming in even little moments of self-doubt, that like down regulates your brain with self-doubt overall, right? Because your brain sees you, well, why would they approach something that was scary or bad? They wouldn't, right? So it's another kind of confidence building thing that your brain is learning behind the scenes.
The act of facing or leaning toward going closer to something that scares you shows your brain on an experiential level through its experience that thing is not dangerous.
Exactly.
Where you could spend hours trying to think your way into training your brain that thing is not dangerous, but if you just move towards it, that behavior shows your brain that thing is not dangerous.
Your brain is smart. It, like in our relationship with other people, it values actions more than words. Yeah. Words matter, but like actions are way more valuable. They're way more predictive for the brain. So they're a better learning opportunity. So anyway.
I love it. Great. Love it.
All right, Emma, this has been super helpful. You are one of my favorite people, not just to chat with and your friends, but to learn from. Like every time I watch one of your videos or read a newsletter or something, like I feel like I'm almost always learning something new, even a sort of subtle way to reframe things. And it helps a lot with my clients. So what's something, if people don't know you very well or want to learn more about you and your work, like where would be a good place for them to go?
Yeah, you can check me out on my website. It's therapyinanutshell.com. And we have a membership where I have 8 courses there, including one of my favorite things, how to process emotions. So it's like this little 30-part course that has 15 little videos and helps people work through really basic skills of working through their emotions.
Awesome. Thanks again, Emma.
Thank you, Nick.